and thank you for tuning in to 90.4 Oman FM with me, Sara Lawati. Today we're discussing one facet of this fascinating history. So joining me today at the studio is Mr. Abdulrahman Saeed Qalatain, who is a researcher, editor, and co-founder of Banaadir Wiki, and engineer Abdulwahab Al-Busaidi, who is a member of Oman Historical Society and board member of Oman Astronomical Society. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you, Sarah, for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Okay, so today we're discussing the relations between Oman and Somalia, and I wanted to start off this interview by asking about the Omani Empire. How far did it extend, and what are the connections that were formed because of it?
A lot of people, in fact, in Oman and everywhere else in the region, when we talk about Omani Empire or Omani influence, in Africa, people just assume one island, which is Zanzibar or probably Pemba, and maybe in some cases, they might mention Mombasa, Lamu, and so on. But Oman Empire starts from Mogadishu up north, the coastal area, going down to Kismayu, Marka, all the way to Mombasa, Lamu, Malindi. We visited, as I mentioned, Comoros Island, really, which is about 3,000 kilometers off the coast of Africa. So Omani influence extends to thousands and thousands of miles, and I'm sure, the listeners or viewers must have seen this beautiful map which shows in red the influence of Oman. So it covers many countries, it covers many cultures, and it lasted for centuries and centuries.
And the ties between Oman and Somalia also began with this, didn't it?
Yes, I think it began.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the interactions. Interactions existed throughout history, even before to Islam, because Banaadir was recognized as an Arabian civilization. So it was known by the Arabian world. So a lot of traders would, if they want to go to the Indian Ocean or to Asia to do trade, they'll always stop over to Mogadishu or Marka, Barawa, about Banaadir coast to trade or to pick up supplies. Now, when the first political establishment or interaction, where the first communication, like on the legitimate level, this was during the Portuguese wars. So when they monopolized, or when they were on the crusade in the Indian Ocean, and they were plundering and looting coastal cities of East Africa, it was then when the Omanis were requested for assistance. I mean, the Ottomans came, but it was not as successful. But when the Omanis came through the Ya'ariba, they removed the Portuguese. As we all know through history, they went to Mombasa, the siege happened. They went to they brought back the normalcy in the Indian Ocean. They they hunted down the Portuguese as far as Mozambique. And then after this is when peace was established in the Indian Ocean. Trade started to pick up again. After that, then we start having more interaction with the Omanis.
So these relations extend pretty far back. But just going back a little bit, you mentioned Banaadir Coast. Now I want to ask what that is and how did the name come about?
So Banaadir, in linguistic terms, Banaadir is plural for Bandar. Persian or Arabic means port city. Similar to Swahili. Swahili means coast, Swahil. In Arabic, Banaadir is Bandar. And we have Bandar Abbas, Bandar Qasim, Bandar Barawa, Barka. Even in Iran today, we have the coastal cities, the Bandar, and we have the Bandari people. Now, this became a part of our identity, because the Banaadir people is a multi-group of Arab groups. There are some Somalis within the Banaadir umbrella. So this became an identity for us, the Banaadir people. And geographically speaking, Banaadir is part of the southern coast of Somalia. So starting from Mogadishu, it can also be argued that it starts from Warsheikh, 100 kilometers from Mogadishu, all the way down from Marka, Barawa, Kismayu can be part of Banaadir, Raskamboni. So this is what we call Banaadir Coast, and the people within these cities are Banaadir people.
And these are the ones that are these are the areas that are mostly influenced by Oman.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I saw in some of the research that you did in Banaadir Wiki as well, you mentioned Sultan Barghash, and he I believe, was the one who established the most influence or most relations between Oman and Somalia. So can you tell me about the role that he played?
Now, Barghash bin Said is a personality who had charisma, who was very influential, and he had this passion for building, a structure. So he instructed to begin with in Zanzibar the building of Beit al-Ajaib, or the House of Wonders. He instructed the starting of what was called Matba'a Sultaniya, which was a press in 1876, if I'm not mistaken. So imagine 140 years ago in Zanzibar, there was printing going on, there was, books being published, and his influence now extended to other territories, which is in the Banaadir coast, starting in Mogadishu, Kismayu, Washeikh, and so on. So there was still up to this point, and I was lucky to visit, one of the biggest ones in Mogadishu, which is the Gerez. We'll probably touch on a bit detail later on. So Barghash bin Said, during his reign, there was a lot of, construction going on. In fact, he is the first ruler of Zanzibar to introduce street lights in Zanzibar, again in 1888. So he left a lot of legacy. He was a man of also wisdom, and we're glad that we're talking about him well after his passing away 150 years or so, with the legacy and with the buildings and with the roads that still exist to this period. So Barghash bin Said is an influential leader, and he left a huge landmark.
And what kind of buildings and roads and things did his legacy leave?
So, common knowledge right now with the Busaidi dynasty, or the Omani Sultanate, who were based in Zanzibar at that time, and their influence, as you mentioned, was extended throughout the East African coast, the southern part, as far as Mogadishu. Now, when Barghash came, and when some of his successors as well, one of the things he did was he built forts, garrisons. These were protection forts. So he built some in Mogadishu palace, and he built palaces there for the qadis or the walis at that time. So if today, a lot of people know about Beit al-Ajaib and the buildings in Mombasa, and because there was a strong foothold there and a strong presence. Now in Mogadishu and Maraka and Banaadir, he built the garrisons there and the forts. And another thing he did was, when he came, in these cities we had ancient walls. We had also fortified walls. These walls acted as defense barriers from nomadic invasion and also the Portuguese. Now, a lot of these walls were destroyed during the Portuguese wars. But what Barghash did, the first thing he did when he came, he saw the wall situation, he rebuilt the wall. And in fact, he even made it higher to give an additional strength to these walls. And then he put these soldiers there as well. Now, I know in Zanzibar, there was more, as I mentioned, his foothold. In Banaadir, the coast, his presence of the Omani Empire was not felt, largely because he only had 2 or 3 soldiers there and an appointed wali. He kept it as that, because peace was always maintained there. And then
And this appointed wali, who was he and what role did he play?
So the first appointed wali, like in Maraka, it was always a Busaidi, like Saif bin Hamid. And then later on, it became a thing where, because due to the peaceful relations and there was no hostility between us and the Busaidis, we started seeing walis from the local areas. And then the interaction grew. We had Qadis from Barawa going all the way to Zanzibar, working as political advisors for the Sultan at that time, working as a personal assistant. There was even a case where there was a issue in Bagamoyo, part of the Barghash influence as well. This is a part of Tanzania, modern day Tanzania. He requested one of the Sheikh Abdulaziz al-Amawi to go and assist and reconcile between the tribal issues in this area. So Abdulaziz al-Amawi was a Qadi from the age of 16. He was sent all the way to Bagamoyo with the Omani convoy just to intervene. So this shows the relationship we had and the trust we had as well.
And with such a strong relationship between Oman and Somalia, I imagine there was a lot of cultural exchange and a lot of people moving to and from. So can you tell me how that manifested?
I mean, I'll start with, something not trivial, but halwa. Can you imagine that there is halwa called halwa hilal up to this minute as we speak, right? It still exists. Halwa hilal was introduced by the family of Hilal al-Kiyumi, who have settled back here in Oman, and it has spread all over. So besides the halwa, when Abdurrahman was talking about those rulers, whether they're al-Busaidis or whether from the locals, they all wore typical Omani tradition, which it consists of the bisht, the jambiyo, the khanjar, the masar al-Omani or Saidi. So the culture, the language, the influence extends, starting from the way they dress. And of course, there is above all this influence of unity, which is they're all Muslims and following the same religion. So, it has been, the word that uses manifest was manifested in every day of their living life.
Wow. And what are the areas where this is most prominent in Somali?
The culture, you mean?
Yes.
I mean, it's very prominent in Swahili Coast because Swahili they were able to preserve the history and they were able to have this interaction. I mean, until today it was Omanis. But in Banaadir, there are some remnants of it. Like, for example, the weddings, we still wear the bish, the jambia. Halwa is still eaten largely in Somalia, in Banaadir. The food is there, as you mentioned. The architecture as well, the buildings, so the white coral. Even though it's an Arabian culture and there's a lot of the stuff, because a majority of Banaadir are Hadrami origins. However, there are Omani, when the Omanis came, they did start to influence it more. So within the Banaadir people, there are some Omani descendants like Al-Bakris, the Bahans who were there in Banaadir at that time, Al-Mahri. These are all Omani people who trace back their lineage to Oman. So when they came, they were able to revive some parts of the culture that was, because we need to remember as well, when the Portuguese that did what they did, trade and condition in Banaadir was very, very it was very stained. So when Barakash came and Busaidis came, they were able to revive it and bring back trade, bring back prosperity. It was a difficult task, but he opened doors. People started coming, like Indian traders started to establish in Mogadishu. And this was all through the Busaidis.
Okay, and what kind of trade did happen there? What did they trade in?
So Mogadishu, we were involved in export and import. So some of the export is ivory, in frankincense. There were textile, a lot of things. Natural
and agriculture as well.
Agriculture as well, yeah.
I think I'll just add here, something we did not cover is the geographical sort of strategic location of Somalia. It's like Oman. I mean, in Oman, in north we have the Hajar Mountains. In Somalia, there's a mountains they call Ogan, and then in the central region of Somalia, it's mainly desert, just like us here in Mantaqa al-Wusta, which is mainly desert. Now, the south of Somalia is more like Dhofar here. They have two rivers, River Shaballe and River Juba, and there are even wild animals. And, Somalia is very rich in minerals and even in reserves of hydrocarbons, which is oil and gas. Somalia has a coastal area of more than 3,000 kilometers, very, very rich in fish and marine life. Somalia has an excellent sort of, at one time, let's say 100 years ago, that was the place where trade happened. That was the place where the port was fully jam-packed, and of course things changed, but Somalia has always been a very rich, not only in culture and history, but also in resources. I thought I'd just highlight. Banaadir coast, especially the ports that we were discussing now.
Historians would describe Banaadir as the grain of Arabia because most of the grains was coming from Banaadir and traded through to Arabian.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, wow, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And I also, so going back to the part where you mentioned there was a lot of architecture that is related to Oman, influenced by Oman. There is a tower specifically. Yes. It's called the Oman Tower. It's a lighthouse.
It's a lighthouse.
Could you tell me about this?
I think Abdurrahman would be in a better position. Please go ahead.
Because I've done my research, honestly, and it's still not, because a lot of history is destroyed in Banaadir coast. So we only rely on oral history. So and sadly there are no. If there was inscriptions, the dates and the names, so these were all destroyed. Some were stolen due to the barbaric years in 1991. Some would call it civil war, and this was erasure of our history. So, like the the lighthouse in Shingani, also the lighthouse in Barawa, the locals would say this is Omani built by Barghash, even though there isn't specific documents to prove this. But this is what the locals say, and this is what people go with. But this is something that we need to investigate. A lot of the history in Banaadir it needs to be investigated, and there isn't like a single book or document that talks about in detail academic and from academic level the deal about between the Oman and the Banaadir coast. There's a lot of books written about Oman, Bosaidi, and the Sultan of Oman and the Swahili coast, but we need to investigate archaeological investigations. We need this.
But if we rely on the locals, as Abdurrahman said, if you ask, for example, when we went to Mogadishu in 2024 February with the delegation, so a lot of people came and rushing and said, do you want to see the Omani Tower? So they call it locally. But Abdurrahman is indeed right. We need to have those documents brought up, dig for the manuscripts and so on. But locally they know them as Banaadir, as a tower built by Barghash bin Said. And there's been no argument to say that the Gereza was not built by Barghash bin Said. And everybody agrees to that because there are it was even turned into a museum where there were a collection of Omani khanjars and Omani suyuf, and up to 1991 it was a museum. Can you imagine? That's only 30 plus years ago, 33 years ago, it was a museum holding, manuscripts and khanajr and even women Omani clothes. And I have a picture of them, maybe we can share at some stage. But, sadly the civil war erased a lot of that. And, but we pray that, Somalia will go back, or the Banaadir coast will go back to its glory, inshallah.
Inshallah. Can you tell me more about the civil war that caused all this erasure?
The civil war started between the coup or the outing of the president at that time, Siad Barre, and then it was a tribal war. And then with the tribal war now in the interior of Somalia, he came to Banaadir, and then there was always the stereotype that these were Arabs living there and they're rich, so this was a target. The Banaadirs were targeted so badly, persecuted, all sorts of atrocities. Things are war crimes. Like I don't know. I don't want to talk about the negative parts. To a sense where we had to migrate, and we were in exile until today. We are suffering until today. We don't have this opportunity to go back. And as I mentioned, because we were different, we were like the Arabs of the Banaadir. There's always room for discrimination and racism, and this was implanted in the law of Somalia through the 4.5, where our rights are restricted. So for us to go back to reclaim our lands or reclaim our houses, the buildings belongs to us, despite having the evidence for this, where we have the certificates of our name on it, the law does not support us. So we have to witness other people living in there. And then the historical buildings were destroyed, the graves were destroyed, and then we start witnessing historical revisionism. So the whole new narrative came about saying these were people came recently. This history belongs to the Somalis, and this is not an Arab situation. And this was something that we're facing today.
Yeah. In fact, I will add to that, the same question. The answer is the situation of the big Gereza now, as we speak, what remains is only a skeleton. It's destroyed, I would say, maybe up to 70%. The whole building almost collapsed. There is no roof. We went inside, all over, grass has grown, and the only thing I showed is probably the water well and at least, some of the major walls that divides the building. So, and I was told that building was specifically targeted by either rockets and so on, but alhamdulillah, I think we can still manage to, we took with us constructions from here, Oman, and they said, it's not a big deal. provided that the thing is place is secure enough, they can rebuild it and bring it back. So a lot of destruction. I think Abdurrahman is very well right on that.
I can talk for hours.
But that's a long.
I know.
Yeah. Things. But we pray. Things will go back to normal, and everybody will have their rights. And but when we went there, they were very cooperative, and they even brought us the deals that Omani had, and in future the idea is to build embassies. There is even a proposal, I might mention it here, that inshallah, if all goes well, to build a major mosque at the Hamarwain and Shangani, a major mosque to be built by Oman and given the name, Sultan Haytham bin Tariq. So that proposal is there. So inshallah, we hope it materializes now.
That's such a difficult thing, obviously, that you've spoken of, and hopefully you get to reclaim your homes again, and everything goes back how it's supposed to be. And you've mentioned this a few times now already, but we didn't talk about it in detail. You've talked about Geraza.
Yes.
And it's a fort, I believe. So maybe we can go into a bit more detail about what that is.
Yes. This fort was, as I said earlier in the show, Barghash bin Said, an individual with passion for, buildings and forts. So he gave an instruction, one to be built in a place called Hamarwaini, between Hamarwaini and Shangani. And Sarah, when we visited that place, the beach, has got white sands and blue turquoise water. It's so beautiful, and the wind and the breeze, it can remind you of any place in the world with beautiful beaches. So that location by itself is magnificent. So when we looked at this building or a fort, I was told, unfortunately I didn't bring a picture with me here right now, but it is as good as Beit al-Ajaib, or as good as the House of Wonders. It has this glamour and beauty, and the design of influence of Omani forts with the two cannons in front. And, the walls are really mostly made of coral, and it lasted up to, 1991 during the Civil War. So it had a big majlis where the wali will sit and get together, and with other influential leaders, tribal leaders, to discuss the issues of the Banaadir coast. But it served as a center for I would say hukum or leadership for that area, and it was given its full respect. So, and in fact, just to mention one thing on this regard, there was a stamp issued in I think 80s with this building on it. So it is quite an iconic, beautiful building that it lasted for many years. When you are on the sea, you approach the port of Mogadishu, it will just look at you, with this beautiful engineering design.
It sounds beautiful. I would love to see it.
Yeah, sure.
So this was built because of the Portuguese invasion?
No, well after they left. By then they've gone.
So whenever Barghash, when he established a land, he always built a fort and put his soldiers there. It's a defensive fort, just to put his president and the Omani flag, or the flag at that time would be there, alongside the city's flag. And you mentioned this because this building was one of the fortunate buildings that survived. That's why everyone knows about it. But there's palaces similar to this in Marika.
Destroyed completely.
In Marika, they're destroyed. Yeah, there in Marika, in Barao was a palace. Barao is still there, and it's actually owned by Barao family. They look after it, and they never sell it. They preserve it. And even outside Mogadishu in Warshak, Barghash will go further out to build a fort there, just as a defense barrier. So he built quite a few.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about now the Omani influence in Somalia. What about the other way?
I'd say that thing. If you're talking, I know we spoke about this before the interview, but if you're talking about from a historical perspective, Omani's interaction was always with Banaadir, because the term Somalia was something that came about in 1960.
Okay.
So there was a thing where Barghash would interact with Somalia or Somalis. It would always be from the city-states at that time, Banaadir coast.
Yeah.
So, later on, today, currently, Somalia is a modern-day Somalia. there is interactions today with Oman, which we'll talk about. But from a historical point of view, it's always
Banaadir Coast.
Identify as a Banaadir Coast, yeah.
Okay, so it's the relations between Oman and Banaadir Coast.
That's yes, yeah.
All right. So we've talked about the influences of Oman in Banaadir Coast, but what about the other way around? Banaadir Coast influence in Oman. Is there anything?
Yes, absolutely. You know, as a lot of families, I think they started migrating back, you know, from Somalia to Oman. And many of them settled here in Oman. And some of them went becoming ministers in the cabinet. The other influence, Sarah, is what we saw happening in the late 17th and 18th century, where major tribes moved from Somalia, not only from the Banaadir Coast, but also even from interior, and settled in Dhofar. Today we have a tribe called Darot. There are thousands of them in Somalia, in Dhofar, and they trace back their roots to Banaadir Coast and Somalia. So. Also, you know, we need to mention the fact that when ships were leaving Oman, whether it's Sur or Suhar or Muscat or Kalhat, and you name it, their first stop after Yemen is Banaadir Coast. Before you even go to Zanzibar and Mombasa, that will take you another maybe 4 or 5 days. So there is this proximity. Now, between Salalah port and Bosasa port, which is in Somalia, it's only 500 nautical miles. So it is very close. You can cover that distance with a fast ship in less than 24 hours, or even 18 hours. So we are very close, but yet very far sometimes, because people do not understand the historical relationship, the geographical proximity that we have these neighbors, just stone throw away from Oman. So the influence has indeed happened here in Oman, because they were trading, they were traveling, they were getting supplies from Somalia, and when they came to Oman, they were getting supply before moving on to India or to Persia and so on. The influence, definitely, they've had huge influence in many ways by introducing their own, whether it is food, whether it's the culture, or even, and also we need to mention there have been a lot of intermarriages between Banaadir Coast and Omanis and the other way around.
I was reading an article the other day on archaeology, and I need to verify and read more. But what he did mention was a lot of masajid in Nizwa. They were he speculates they were inspired by Banaadir, because the Banaadir, the masajid, was very unique, because we were part of the Indian Ocean. We were exposed to the whole world, global world. So for some of the masajid, they had Seljuk influence, they had Asian influence, they had Arab. Then they also had Banaadir. So we witnessed a mixture of architecture here, cultural mixture. And then he looked at the mosques in Nizwa, and he said a lot of these are similar to Banaadir. Whether we copied them or they got it from us, I don't know, but I need to read more. But these are all this history is all speculations.
Abdurrahman will be going to Nizwa for the first time. Is it tomorrow, day after tomorrow? Then you'll make your own analysis. Since you're a researcher, then you come back and tell us at some stage.
Yes, that would be amazing to find out if there were actual relations that influenced it.
Yes.
You actually mentioned a very interesting point here that I would like to explore more. You mentioned that the knowledge about the relations between the Banaadir Coast and Oman, it's not very known, it's not very widespread. Why is that?
Well, the reason is we have a lot in common, right? I mean, there is this religious factor, there is this even, Arabic is well spoken there, but also even Omanis, when they went to Banaadir Coast, they learned, the local language, whether it's Somali or Barava or Swahili. So when it comes to this cultural exchanges, the bondages, Sarah, very, very well that Oman has this deep-rooted hospitality mentality. So wherever they go, they spread their culture through their acts, through their character, through their humbleness. And also Omanis were very smart. They will explore the opportunities in agriculture, because they're having a lot of experience here by making aflaj and so on, and suddenly they find rivers there. So they introduce new seeds like the cloves in Zanzibar or other things. So the reason is that there is a lot of common sort of factors that bind these two nations or two different. The ocean divides us, that's very true. But when it comes to interest, we all want to prosper. We all want to succeed. We all want to have, what you can even say, a good life for generations to come. So, yeah, that's the reason for this prosperity and bondage and love and understanding between those two cultures.
Okay. Now, I also wanted to ask about a part of history, and it's about the Italian occupation of Somalia. Can you give me more information about that?
Yeah, I mean, when Barghash took the rule or admin duty, he took it at the time when the colonial entities were starting to have their eyes prying on Africa. There was scramble of Africa at that time. So it was a very hard time for the Omani Sultanates to combat this. I mean, they did try. He was pressured to sign treaties and sell off the East African to the Europeans. They were pressuring him. They used slavery against him. They used propaganda against him. Barghash tried his best to keep hold of Banaadir and keep hold of his power, his influence. But he passed away, and then his brother came later. His brother was very hostile. I think it's Khalifa bin Buzaid. He was very hostile towards the European, and we saw what happened there was the one-day war in Zanzibar when the Omanis tried to attack the British and take power by force, but it didn't last long, and it was very unsuccessful. And they felt the strength, and they thought like we cannot do anything. And it came to a point where some historical sources says that there was the Germans who wanted Banaadir as well. They were in Kenya. They wanted Banaadir as well, and they were pressuring. The Italians came and they tried to dupe Barghash or to trick him and to tell him to sign this paper and to scare him and say, look, there's already German warships sitting in the ports of Banaadir and there's English warships. They're ready to attack. Give it to us, we'll protect it. And he held on to it until the end. But in the end, the colonial powers, Omanis, we were outpowered, outmaneuvered, out-organized. The weapons, the technology they had was way advanced. No. So we had no choice, and that's how the Italians came in. And when they came in, they changed everything. Some of the buildings, they started building their Italian architecture. They started building roads and demolishing some of the buildings. And we saw the slow erasure of Arab history and Islamic history as well. The first thing they did was they removed the walls, and then they made Mogadishu the capital. And then we saw the influx of outsiders and nomadic people coming in, because it's a capital city, and that's where all the jobs are, employment. And this is how Banaadir started going downhill from then on.
Yes.
So now we see two things that have caused the erasure of the history in Banaadir Coast. So there was the civil war that you mentioned, and then also the Italian invasion. Now, you mentioned the treaties that were signed. What are these treaties?
These are just to give admin rights. They at that time they called it protectorates. But from an African or Arab point of view, when you look at the Western world, we know these are colonizers, and they're here to colonize, and they're here to establish their foot and their influence. So obviously they will mask it as a treaty, as a protectorate, as a protector, and they're here to civilize us, but it was always the opposite.
If you allow me, I'll just add one thing. It is the fact that when Omanis went to this Banaadir coast, there was intermarriages, cultural exchanges. They will pray in the same masajid. They will have the same feast together. They will celebrate Eid together. You could see this love and bondage that they are one community. But when these occupiers came, they lived completely in isolation. It's almost never happened, maybe one or two marriages, if at all. But they had their own culture, they had their own living their own camps, so they never integrated. And they treated, the locals as like you can even say a secondary citizen. So their occupation is based on interest of the Western power to take the resources, whether it's gold, whether it's minerals like uranium, or even the other things like even agriculture. So there's a big difference between the presence of Omanis or other Arabs and when the occupation started in the late 18th century. So this now brings us to the question that what happened even in the mid of the 20th century is a result, in my belief, as what this influence left, and that you started having people fighting, tribes fighting one another. So this led to a civil war. So there was never stability after the departure of the Italian occupation.
Okay, I see. Now, this civil war that you mentioned, it was between the interior and the coast of Somali?
It was mainly interiors, nomadic tribes.
Okay.
After the Italians left, a lot of they still had the presidents in Somalia. Even though they left, a lot of the presidents or the ministers were appointed by the Italians. They were trained. Now, in the civil war, it was when they took out the Siad Barre at that time, and there was tribal rivalries between tribes. They fought, and then it came to Banaadir, because when the country is instability is gone, and there's anarchy, then it's open season for everyone.
Yeah.
And then it came to Banaadir, and then what happened after that. But from a Banaadiri perspective, we don't see it as a civil war when they came to our land. We saw it as an invasion, an occupation, because we can still feel it today. What was left, even though the general population in Somalia have tried to move on, but from our perspective, it's a bit difficult for us.
Big loss now.
But we're seeing positive days now. The youth of Somalia are trying their best to change. They want to put the past behind them. We are collaborating with them. They really love our history. They recognize our history, the Arab history. A lot of them support us as well, and I'm sure you've witnessed that when you went to Mogadishu.
Absolutely.
So it's positive now.
Yeah, it is positive. I think because, after fighting one another for, let's say, 30, 40 years, I think there is, time that you realize, this bloodshed, brings no benefit to anyone. So the more we sit together, following the Omani style, which is to negotiate, over the table and check out the differences. So I think the future looks good. There is a good prospect that Somalia will be definitely back on its feet again, prosperous again. And there is, a lot of, probably some people have heard that at one time those coastal areas were so rich they will send even, what you call as supplies, for free to our region. So, having stability, having prosperity will benefit everybody. Inshallah.
Absolutely, inshallah. I love to hear that the youth is taking action and doing more. Can you give me some examples of the things they've done?
So I was part of a charity. I would call it a charity. It's more of my personal thing for us to revive and preserve our history. We were doing a restoration program, a project where all the buildings in Banaadir, we were painting them white, giving that look again. We also installed lighting. We installed paving for the locals to be able to commute to the mosque and the workplace. And we put up a donation fundraising, and a lot of the donations was actually from Somalis. And there wasn't any political agenda or biases against it. They supported us, they pushed us, and they were happy for us to do this. They want to see our history be revived again. And a lot of them, so we received huge support. And even today, when I do my YouTube channel and my website, I see the comments. There's always the negative comments, but we always tend to ignore them, and we always focus on the positive. And a lot of the positive are the young generation who are more educated, and they're politically aware of what's going on, and they want to be part of the global world, Somalia. They want to prosper, and they know fighting doesn't take us anywhere in life. So they're trying to coexist, and hopefully this can bring good change in the future. And we hope.
That's lovely to see.
It is. Just to add again, I always like to look at the economical benefit, because it's so rich, that country, and the resources are just plenty. So, stability will only bring boom and prosperity. So, inshallah, we just pray for that to happen.
Inshallah. Now, I want to talk about the current relations between Oman and Somalia. What are they like?
I can only speak from Banaadir interest.
Yeah, I think I am involved partly in this regard. the current relation between Oman and Somalia is at its best that it's ever been, because whenever there are conflicts, whenever there are issues, Oman acts as a supporter to bring different factions to sit together and talk. So we have a Somali embassy here with an excellent, passionate ambassador whom I have met many, many times. He has, in fact, I might even mention the fact that soon we'll have Salam Air flying directly to Mogadishu. That's something that's going to happen. So the relationship are growing. And also, the trade between Oman and Somalia annually is $400 million US, Sarah. That number is from the Chamber of Commerce. I did not make that number. $400 million US. That's a huge amount of money that you trade between Oman and Somalia. So we both have bilateral relations in commerce. We import a lot of livestock, and the cement that is being used in Somalia and Banaadir is almost entirely from Oman. Entirely from Oman. We also supply them with petrochemicals, cables, electronics, re-export to them. So the relations are good, and we hope to even improve them. And the embassy is now planning to do exhibitions, conferences, lectures, and this is a nice platform really here in Oman FM 90.4. To bring the attention that this land of grace and bounty and plenty of resources, to pray for its peace and stability, because tomorrow we'll have a lot of trade exchange, and it will create opportunities for Omani business people and Somali business people, definitely. Our Banaadir business.
I mean, from a Banaadir perspective, it's good seeing all this bilateral trade and prosperity and communication and engagement. But I personally hope it is not this does not come at the expense of the Banaadir people.
Yes.
Because people need to realize that there are Banaadir people who are still existing in Somalia, and they may be the remnants of the Omani Empire, Omani influence. So if we need this needs to be addressed. The struggle we are facing, the political restraint. So if there are any bilateral agreements, this needs to be addressed, because the last power or authority before the Italians was the Omani Empire in Banaadir Coast. So if there are any re-establishment, this will need to be addressed, the struggle, how we're going to change this and give the rights back to the Banaadir people in Somalia.
Yes, it's a very important point, really, to be inclusive, not to just target a specific. That's a wonderful.
I just thought we don't want our history to be used as a stepping stone to say yes, let's go inside now, Somalia.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad we can use this platform to help raise awareness.
I'm very happy to use it. Come here.
All right, now I wanted to move on and speak about your project, which is Banaadir Wiki. And maybe you can give us some information about this and how it came about.
Yeah, I mean, you did ask earlier, why is there a lot of this information not widespread? Yeah. And this is exactly why we came about it, because Banaadir history is very long history, it's ancient history, and it's very broad. So many things have been written about it from every corner of the world. The Arabians wrote about history, the Asians, Chinese empire came. Now, a lot of these information are academic, so they're all in the libraries, archived, or they're all with the elders, oral transmission, or they're in the manuscripts, makhtutat, or the architectural history. But the layman, a general person, will not have time to go to those libraries. So if you want to know about Banaadir, we'll go to Google and research Banaadir. And the unfortunate thing is there's not much information on the internet today, on digital media. And this is where this brought about a lot of confusion. A lot of the Banaadir youth did not know their identity because, of course, in 1991, when we came as refugees, this brought a big factor to it. So this is why we came together as a group of us. We said, let's establish a website and let us be the author of our own history. So when someone types Banaadir, let them come to us and we write the correct history. So Banaadir Wiki, we have a section for the library. We collate any information we have, whether they're photocopies, whether they're photos, we put them there. We also put current affairs in Banaadir, what's going on. We address literally everything: history, current affairs, culture, architecture, just to preserve, to document, to educate, to digitalize our history. And I have the YouTube channel. This YouTube channel, I focus on interviewing elders, interviewing prominent people. I've interviewed Abdul Wahab as well.
Just really good. Yes.
We need to speak the language of the youth, and they're not going to go to the library to read a book. They're going to go on the internet. So we need to we interview elders, and they tell us the story about their life growing up, and it gives us a good image. It gives us a vision. It gives us an identity. Like this is what we achieved in our life, and this is
also travel to Mombasa and other.
And not only Banaadir, I interview out people, anyone associated with Banaadir history, anyone that played a major part, whether there's Omanis, I interviewed them. I've interviewed Swahili people, because Banaadir is always an extension of the Swahili coast. Even historically speaking, they say Swahili starts from Mogadishu, Swahili coast, goes all the way back down to Sofala and Mozambique. So this is part of our history, so we always interview Swahili. I was in Mombasa, I went to Lamu, I vlogged it.
You've been to Lamu?
I've been to Lamu, yeah.
Excellent.
And I'm planning to vlog as well, Oman as well, and I've been interacting with the locals there. Very inspirational, and a video will be coming out soon as well.
Inshallah.
What a necessary initiative. It's great to hear that this information is becoming accessible to the masses, as you said. Is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude the interview?
Yeah, the main reason for us why I'm here is an opportunity for us for me or for Banaadir people to preserve the history and to raise awareness of what's going on. And when I spoke to a lot of Omanis or a lot of Arabs, a lot of people don't know about Banaadir as to an extent. They know about Swahili coast, and this is why we do what we do. And I hope people start reading more, look through the lens of history, and be educated more. And me myself, I'm not the most educated, but I learn as we go. And this is people should just read history, learn, and you know where you are, you know your identity, you know where you come from. It's very important.
Yes.
And where can people find your website and your YouTube page?
Banaadir. My website is called Banaadir Wiki, and YouTube is Banaadir Factor.
All right. Anything else you would like to add?
I will just add to Abdurrahman's point, really. He raised a very important point when it comes to history, that we have a generation now who believe, all the questions can be answered through Google or ChatGPT. Now, that is not true, really. The historical manuscripts and documents, some of them still exist either somewhere in private houses or even as a collection for, So let us look for historical facts from the sources. Not from the internet, but hopefully this will change in the future by putting the correct information. But I look for the day where we have absolutely actual facts being available to the young generation for them to read.
Happy to have hosted you here and happy to have spoken about this important subject. So thank you.
I really enjoyed sitting here talking. Thank you for the hospitality, and thank you to Oman as well. This country is so beautiful. I've been to so many Arab countries, but when I came here, it's just different. The people are more vocal, more local. They're more hospitable, and they're very welcoming, very down to earth. You just go to the market, you talk to someone, they ask where you're from, and they'll welcome you to your house. Next thing you know, you're going to someone's house eating dinner. It's so amazing. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it too. You're welcome anytime.